Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Give 'em Heck podcast. We're very happy to have any new viewers that have popped in. We'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. And, of course, the old viewers, we are happy to have you back again. And what are we talking about today?
Well, we've got another exciting episode to talk about. It's been quite a week.
That's
an understatement.
That's an understatement.
But that's okay. I feel that every time we do a podcast, for some reason, I said this to one of my coworkers this week, is that I think the podcast is challenging us. Because it seems like everything we kind of are talking about, life is like, I'm going to test you on that one to see if that you really are the strength that you're portraying. Well, I hope I am. Because one thing I have found this week with life is that we all could use a little bit more encouragement.
Absolutely.
It's easy to tear people down, always bring out their faults, kind of like make them feel like they can't do anything right.
I suppose it would have helped if I would have turned my phone on silent.
That's why I don't bring mine with me. But anyway.
Never know when somebody might need to get a hold of me. Maybe the barn will get on fire.
Oh my gosh. But anyway, with that being said, life, right? It's just things happen, and some things are not always in our control. So
something I want to add to what you said is that you said, people will oftentimes push you down and get to you and stuff like that. I want to say it's also very easy for ourselves to do that to us.
Oh, yeah.
That voice in your head that tells you what you don't want to hear. It's very easy to let your own head...
Oh, you're your worst enemy.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Exactly.
But I think, too, like with the point that I was making, is that when people, and I think this goes along with what you're saying, is that when people tend to always point out your faults, instead of maybe finding a way to make you feel like you have some worth or value, the thing is that you can really start to believe that.
Yeah, it's like you're convincing yourself.
You're convincing yourself that, maybe they're right. Maybe I am not who I thought I was, because that's what they see, so they must be right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very easy to let others drag you into a pit you didn't want to get into, and then when you're down there, there's no one else to yell at you, so then you start filling your own void.
Right. Yeah. And that can be dangerous too, because what are you filling it with?
Yeah. You encouraging yourself, or are you letting that...
I'll tell you, encouragement is about, it's a two-sided thing, right? And it's hard.
Well, you gotta give yourself positive reinforcement too. You gotta surround yourself with the right people that not necessarily tell you what you want to hear, but will point out the problem. Constructive criticism, I guess.
Thank you.
Like tell you hey, this is what we see. This is maybe how you can improve, and then you can reflect on that.
Right.
Instead of just surrounding yourself with constant negativity, and then before you know it, you're
10 feet under.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, this started off on I hope an uphill talk, not a downhill. But like Brian was saying, and we'll get to the topic too, is I just want to thank everyone too for tuning in, and I always hope that that this podcast does bring hope and encouragement to you, and to help you to want to change, because that's the thing, right? It's always about being the change. Again, we always have the disclaimer that we're not doctors, psychologists, or counselors, not giving any medical advice or psychological advice. We're just here to deal with real life situations. And getting back to what we were just talking about with the encouragement thing, when I was a teacher, one thing that I would always try to do with my students is that if I had to have a one-on-one talk with them, I would always, for every negative thing that I would have to bring out to them, like, Brian was just talking about criticism, right? There's a way to bring that about where you can still lift people up. There's nothing wrong with pointing out to people that they're not doing something correctly or right, or whatever that situation that you're in might be. There's nothing wrong with that, but like what I would do is for every negative thing that I would say, I would always try to throw in 2 positives. You know, because
it's like the exact opposite of 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Exactly.
You want to
exactly. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just you got to be careful with stuff like that because you can really get people down on themselves. And you know what? I don't know about you, Brian, but I don't need people pointing out my faults. I already know what they are.
Yeah, I think it's more of less a something of telling me not so much what my flaws are, but maybe what I do wrong, how I can improve.
Right, how I can do better.
How you can do better, exactly. It's not so much a you're terrible at this. It's more like, you know.
Yeah, I know I am. Thank you. I'll tuck that away for later.
But like more of like a, you know, hey, we saw how you handled that situation. Maybe we can work on that.
Isn't it always in the approach?
The approach is everything.
The approach is everything. And also, I'll say this. The other part of it, too, is it's not always what you say, but how you say it. And I'm not talking just tone. It's like what you were just saying, Brian. It's also how you bring it about. You know what I mean? Like, is it a constant beating? Or is it a way to bring it about that you can still get your point across, but maybe encourage them? Because I found when doing that with my students, I could get them to do anything for me, and they wanted to improve themselves because they knew deep down that even though there was things we needed to work on, they knew I still believed in them.
It's all about positive feedback.
Right. They knew I still believed in them, so they knew they could believe in themselves, right? Yeah. You don't need to feed all that negativity to people because you know what? They already know it. They already know, believe it or not. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're going with that. So last week we had talked about the difference between existing and living. And one of the things that I hope that you guys got out of it was finding a way to do exactly that, right? Because you want to not just exist, you want to live. And whatever that means to you and wherever that situation that you're in brings you to that, to change, right? That has to work for you because there's nothing wrong with that. And another thing I want to throw out there is remember that you don't need people's approval for that because it's your life to live that makes you happy.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we had talked about in our last podcast, Brian, was not only not needing the approvals of others, but what that looked like between the difference of existing and living. And one of the things that we talked about that kind of hinders us from doing that is feelings and emotions. And I had told you that regret was one of those things that I dealt with Mom. You know, how am I going to move on? Because it wasn't guilt, it was regret that I had. And you had mentioned the example of how long are you going to deal with those things beating you? And you had mentioned an example of, you know, eventually you're going to take that stick away and start beating that deal with it instead of it beating you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And whatever that situation looks like it can be a feeling, it can be an emotion, it can be within yourself, it can be somebody else doing it to you. But sooner or later, you got to take the stick, right, and find a way to deal with that situation, whatever it means. It's not the same for everybody.
Yeah. Well, why would you want to live long term with a situation constantly wearing you down?
Exactly, because it's exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting. And some people let that happen, and that's when, you know, as we've talked about in prior messages, it's important to surround yourself with people that actually care.
Yeah, because eventually, you do get tired, you get wore out, but you have to defend yourself at one point and say, okay, it's enough. I have to change my situation because you're only hurting yourself by not changing that situation. Yeah. You're just bringing yourself lower.
Ultimately, you're the one who's dealing with the consequences.
Well, yeah, because you can't change people.
Yeah, exactly.
They have to change themselves The only person you can change is you. You're not responsible for their actions. You're not responsible for what they do or don't do. Yeah. So at what point do you step back from that situation and say, okay, I'm not in control of them. And you can't be, okay? That's fine. But I can control me, my situations, my feelings, my emotions, what I think of myself, where I'm at in life, to where you're like, well, how do I better myself in my situation? Because it's always about trying to better yourself, right? Because it will be to your detriment if you don't. Yeah. Life is too short, because one day you're going to wake up and realize, how long have I lived with these regrets? Was it worth it?
Yeah, before you know it, your whole part of your life is gone that you can't get back.
Right, exactly. So with that being said, what I did this week, you had mentioned about being more thankful. And the example that you had given was, I asked you, how do you move on? And one of the examples I had used was, like when Mom passed away, I thought, how could I live without her? And the memories of so much regret is what just brought me down. And you said, when Nana passed away, you didn't think about it like that. Yeah. You thought about all the happy times, all the good times that you and Nana had together. And the one thing that came to my mind this week was thankfulness. And I thought, you know what? Monday morning I woke up and I said, okay, we can't just have these podcasts and not be examples. If we're gonna talk it, we have to live it. Yeah. Right? And some of those situations happen to us, even when we don't want them to. Oh God. But
life always has a way of throwing things at you don't want.
Right? So here's the thing. I woke up Monday morning and I thought, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do this week. I'm gonna wake up every morning and be thankful for something that will give me a good memory, that will help me to realize that life is too precious. And it really changed my perspective on a lot of things.
Lightens the load.
It did. Did it diminish the loads? No, because I was still faced with stuff every day. But it's the perspective, right? Of when you are being thankful, I think it can change your outlook.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that that's an important thing, is to be mindful of being thankful in those situations. So our topic today that we're going to be talking about is instead, in existing versus living, we're going to be talking about purpose versus destiny.
Ooh. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So one thing that we had talked about before, Brian, is I had asked you, do you think life it just is a happenstance? And you had said that because we don't know the future and we take every day with giving us our situations, yes, we want to live and not just exist, but it's choice, right? Like you said, we always have a choice, even though we don't always know what's going to happen the next minute, the next hour, the next couple days, whatever. We always are faced with choices that we can make to change our situations. So,
something I want to add to that is when I say that, we always have a choice, obviously I want to be clear, because some people that I've had conversations like this with they've said, well, I didn't have control over that situation. And I said, no, you don't always have control over the situation.
Right.
But you do have the control of how you handle it.
Right.
And that's one thing that I want to make clear, because, like I said, I don't want people to think that I'm like, everything is a choice. Okay, well, I'm just not going to pay my electric bill this month.
Yeah, see how that works out for you.
Yeah, you might get a few phone calls.
Or wake up in the morning with no electricity or heat, but whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can go back to being cavemen. But yeah, no, it's all in how you react to situations that can make all the difference in the long term. Maybe not the short term. Short term, you may find yourself stressed, anxious, angry, upset. Mm-hmm. But long term, you'll thank yourself for reacting in a more I don't want to say responsible way, but maybe in a brighter way?
Yes. And because we have choices and we are not always in control of our situations because life happens and we don't control other people in the way they deal with situations, whether they're aimed towards you or just life is happening. So it is what it is. I want to say this. We had talked about being in control of our emotions. Feelings are one thing, emotion is another. In saying all that, when you are dealing with a situation, I think it's good to know yourself, meaning this. Sometimes you can react in a situation that's not helpful. So to know yourself enough to say when you're in a situation that, okay, maybe right now it's better for me to not deal with this situation. Sometimes, for example, you might have to walk away at the moment and not deal with the situation right there because you know it's better, knowing yourself, that it's better not to say anything because you might regret what you're going to say or do in that situation.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to react in the moment because a lot of times reacting in that moment, you'll end up doing things you don't want to do.
Or saying something that you wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that to where sometimes I take a few days stepping away from a situation to where I'm like, you know what? It's better right now if I don't say anything because I know myself.
Yeah.
I know myself enough to know that this could turn out bad. And I'm going to step away for a minute. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Sometimes it's good. Like, in fact, I would encourage, like, the more stressful the problem, the more time you might need.
Absolutely. Absolutely, to do that. So with the topic today of being purpose versus destiny, I believe that we all have a purpose. No matter what we think of ourselves, no matter what anybody else thinks of us, I believe that when we find our purpose, we fulfill our destiny. So I say that to say this. What do you think, Brian, is the difference between purpose and destiny?
Are you asking, like, if they go along with each other, or what is the difference between them as separate things?
Both.
Oh, both. Well, I guess if I was to separate them, I'd say, having a purpose is something that can give you something to hold on to. Like I think we've mentioned it in prior podcast episodes, is like having a reason to wake up in the morning. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a long-term thing. It's something you enjoy.
Yep.
That purpose that fulfills you as an individual. Could be temporary, it could be a small thing, it could be a big thing. It could be something as small as going for a white, English is hard. Like going for a walk every day.
Right.
Or going fishing. But destiny in and of itself, I believe, is long-term.
I like
something that you can really find that brings you lasting enjoyment. Like, for example, I used to go four-wheeling when we were younger. You could say that was a purpose, but we don't go four-wheeling anymore, sadly. But
we hike.
Would I sit here and say that going four-wheeling changed my life or fulfilled me long-term? No, of course not. But destiny is something that you carry with you when you find it, or when it comes.
It makes a difference in your life.
It makes it's a lasting difference.
It's an impact.
Yeah, and when you combine those two things, purpose and destiny, you'll know when you find it.
Oh, you will, because you'll feel fulfilled.
Long term,
right? And it may take a while to get there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So that's why I'm saying I believe that we all have a purpose. And when we find our purpose, we'll find our destiny. So I know we talk about my mom, Nana, a lot on this show, but I kind of want to go a different route tonight to say that Dad. My dad always was a risk taker to the point where it annoyed Nana because he was always the type of person that was like, well, you're never going to know if you don't try. You know, what if I try and fail, then at least I can say that I tried. You know, that was always him. It was always that next adventure or that next challenge or that next, you know, because that was just built in him. And I have a lot of that in me. And some people are not risk takers, and that's okay. You don't have to be a risk taker, I guess. But I think sometimes when you're not a risk taker, and we'll look at that a little bit more, I think by not being a risk taker, I think you miss out on a lot in life. It makes you not really sometimes help you to grow.
Yeah.
Does that
It's
make
like we had said in, I think, another prior podcast, some people don't like change.
Right. Absolutely. Because a risk is a change, right?
Mm-hmm. Or a risk can lead to change.
Is there anything wrong with that?
No, but people tend to overthink.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not just saying, you know, viewers or everybody in general.
Oh, yeah. Changes
You know,
can
you
be
look
hard
at
for some
something
people.
that could be a really good change, right?
Right.
But then all of a sudden, before the change happens, you'll start thinking.
You're like, oh, man, well, what if? What if? It's always the if that kills everything. That if kills everything. And I think that was, like with Dad, why I appreciated him so much is he never thought about the if. I mean, he took a lot of risks in life. He owned a lot of businesses. And the thing is that with doing that, I look back and I think it made him the man that he was. You know, because he wasn't afraid of the change. He never thought about the if. And
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a time when I was like, hey, can we do this? And he said to me, oh, no, I don't think we should do that.
no, hardly. If anything, once you've said it, he's like, how do we do it?
Yeah.
When do you want to do it? Let's plan this out. And one thing he always said to me, and I'll use a job for instance, is because he had many jobs. And like I said, he owned businesses and he just was always go, go, go. He always said to me, Penny, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
He's told me that too.
Yeah. I think he was very fulfilled in his life. There may have been a lot of things that he would look back and say, would I have done differently? But
Name one person.
name one person that wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? But you know what? I don't think he would, if he was here today, if you were to ask him, would you have done it differently to where you wouldn't have tried? He'd have done it. He'd have done it.
I would say it'd be more like this. If you were to sit down with him and ask him, do you regret it? I think he'd say no.
No, he didn't regret it. He loved every minute of it. He was such an independent individual. He stood alone in that. And I know how he feels because I'm like that. And that struggle that is always within me is what he constantly fights, is being that individual.
Yeah.
I don't know how
It was inspiring.
It was inspiring. And because he always instilled that in me, and it's with me today, sometimes it can be a blessing and it can be a curse at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can. Because it's hard to be underneath someone's thumb when you have that type of fight in you, that you want to be independent and individual. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And he always wanted to make the difference. He always wanted to be that difference, that change, because he wasn't afraid of it.
Yeah.
But definitely a risk taker. And one thing he had always said to me was, don't stay planted. Don't try to grow where you're at, because your roots will rot where they are. It's like a plant, right? They become root bound. Because sometimes you have to move on, and change is good, because if you stay where you're at all the time, you get stale.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's literally the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right. I love
literally
change.
that.
I love change. I think it's amazing. It sometimes too much. Sometimes I think I like change too much.
I mean, hey, is there really anything wrong with that? Like, can you honestly say that throughout the change that's occurred in your life, that you would sit there and say, I really wish that wouldn't have changed, or I really wish I would have done that differently. And I mean that rhetorically. Like, obviously you don't have to answer because that's, your own personal viewpoint. But like for me, I can sit here and say that with all the change that's happened both recently and in the past, I can honestly sit here and say that in spite of all of it, it made me who I am today.
That's it.
And
That's
whether it was good, bad, or ugly,
yeah.
I don't have any regrets.
Well, it shapes you.
Yeah, exactly. You can use those things to make you a better person.
Exactly.
Learn from the experiences, learn from the heartache, learn from the struggle. And then before you know it, you're going to come out ready for the next punch.
Yeah. Oh, it makes you a stronger person too, in many ways.
And like I think I've said this before too, is like it makes you more self-respectful. Like it makes you more confident in yourself.
Yeah.
It's not so much of what other people see around you or just you being able to take any wave that hits you. But then when you get through it, you're like, you can breathe.
It makes you stronger.
And you're like, I'm prepared.
Yeah, because you never, and this is what Nana always used to say, you never know how strong you are until you have gone through that battle. And then the next one you face, you think you can't. But then you look back at what you just accomplished and you're like, yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
It's all about challenging yourself.
Oh, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. And even though even the small things at the time when you're in them can seem so overwhelming, eventually you're going to look back at that situation and say, okay, I made it. And I can move on. I've learned, like you said, through these things. And it makes you a stronger person. Papa was a very strong person. Mentally, he was, oh my goodness. And that's why I loved sitting and talking with him, because he will always give such good advice. Like, he would never tell me what to do, and he never demeaned me for what I didn't do.
If anything, he challenged you.
If anything, he would challenge, and inspire you to do it, and just keep encouraging to do it, especially if I came to him with a new business aspect of something like, Dad, I think I want to try this. He'd be like, yeah, let's do it. It was almost sometimes scary, because I was like, I better not mention it to him because I know he's going to want to do this.
Sometimes it's almost like, I want you to talk me out of it. Why are you?
Yeah, you couldn't talk him out of anything. That's the whole thing. When he got his mind set on something, it was done. And sometimes it can be a slow go, though, when it's happening, right? I mean, it can take a long time to get to where you want to go, because maybe that inspiration of that change of where you want to go, it's going to take some time to get there. But
some storms last longer than others.
But you will. You'll get there.
You'll get through it.
Yep.
Sun always rises.
Just keep going. Keep going. And one thing that Mom would always say, and I would say that, like, because some days and some weeks are harder than others, I tend to get this mindset of, man, I wish I wasn't going through this. Let's just be over with it. Let's be done. Let's move on so we can move on with our lives. And she would always say, never despise your journey. It may be taking you to your purpose.
Yeah, it's true.
Because like we were just saying, it shapes you, right? Into who you are. So what are some things, Brian, and you don't have to mention names or anything, and, choose to be as open as you want to be, but like even this week, what have you learned?
What have I learned?
Because I know you were faced with some pretty challenges this week.
Yeah, putting it mildly. Well, I'd have to say the biggest thing that I learned is to not doubt myself. Wow. It's very easy to put yourself in a place where you know you're right, but you still let the small things build up. And I did get to that point. I thought about if I could have done things differently. But then the more I thought about it, And the more I ran it through my head, I was like, there's always a different thing you could have done different. But the core fundamental thing, that's what struck a nerve with me. And it made me stop and think, I'm not that person that this person thought I was. Why let them judge me? Why let them mold me into something I'm not? I'm better than that. I know my worth.
Nice.
And that's the biggest thing that I can say, that as I sit here, I can honestly say that that's where the difference is. I'm not the same person I was yesterday.
I know. Is that a bad thing?
No.
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 No, because...
At least it's not a me problem.
Well, yeah, and I think sometimes when you're in whatever situation you're in, and you're like, okay, I'm faced with this situation. It is what it is. I can't control others, but I need to find a way to, yes, move forward, but better myself, because if I don't, it's not going to be healthy for me either. Yeah. Even though this person is dragging themselves down, I'm not going down with them. Will the choice that I decide to make to do what I need to do for my health, mentally and emotionally, is it going to help me?
Well, that's the biggest thing. You're letting the situation beat you down, or are you going to walk away from it? That's the biggest thing. Right.
And sometimes that it's hard because it can cause a lot of hurt, even to yourself, right? Like not just to the other person that you're dealing with, but it causes a lot of hurt for yourself. Again, it can bring up like some fears. Maybe it causes you to want to step back for a minute and say, okay, I don't want to have to change this because I'm going to have to go through this, or I'm going to have to feel this. I'm really going to have to face this thing head on. But can you sit here tonight, Brian, and tell me, with everything that's happened to you this week, facing those things the way that you did head on, are you better for it, even though they were hard and they were maybe some emotional things that you had to go through? Are you better for it tonight?
Yes, with 100% certainty. Because there's only so much one can do.
Right. So to say...
And when you finally run out of things to give, at some point you have to stop and take stock of what you have left.
Well, that's it, because people can drain you.
I always knew there was a difference between being drained and being taken from. And what I mean by that is you can give all of yourself to the point where you have nothing left to lose. Yeah. But once that person starts taking from you personally, not physically, like this isn't a physical thing. When that person when that person starts taking pieces of you, to where you become an emotionless machine, that's when you know you've hit a wall. And that's basically what happened with me. There's nothing more I can do.
Right. Yeah, because they've made choices, right? They've made those choices.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
I was starting to take so much of myself that it was basically turning me into something I wasn't.
Right.
And that's where you got to put the stop. When you've hit that limit. It's one thing to give everything you got,
right?
Because you're doing it willingly. But once you start giving pieces of yourself that you don't want to give up, and it turns you into something completely different, like when it's noticeably different,
right?
That's when you've got to take a step back.
Because at that point, it's to your detriment, but to what? To their gain. So what have you gotten out of this?
Yeah. Look, you give so much of yourself, that person is sitting on a high pedestal. Like they think they're, like, what do I have to lose?
Right.
Since when did this become just about you?
Right. Yeah, and in life can be that way, but I think it's healthy that you recognize that within yourself. The problem is the people that beat you down don't recognize that.
Yeah.
They don't even recognize that within themselves, I think, a lot of times, too. So you have to be willing to step back and look at that situation and say, okay, what is the whole aspect of this situation? At some point, when you've given all you can and you've got nothing left to lose, that can be one of two places for you. It can be either a healthy place or it can be a dangerous place. Because people who have nothing to lose, you can be treading on some really dangerous grounds.
That's how I am. And this isn't just what we're talking about currently with what happened recently, but just with, past things, is that the way my mind works is once I have nothing left to lose, then there is no limit to what I will do to preserve myself.
Right.
Because what else am I holding on to?
Exactly. At that point, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
So you got to do what's best for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are hard decisions sometimes. Most times they are very hard decisions.
A lot of times they're things you don't even want.
Right.
Like with my situation, I didn't want any of it.
Right. But
I would have given my left arm to fix things.
Right.
But there's only so much that I can do.
Right.
When the other party isn't willing to give up anything.
Right. Well, you can't.
They just take what I took or what I gave them,
and more,
and ran with it.
Right. Right. Well, you can only sacrifice so much, and then after a while, there's just nothing left to give. You know. So, but it's good that you're aware of that, which is again one of those things with you where
being self-aware helps. And I encourage a lot of people to reflect on themselves and realize their worth. And that's the biggest part of being self-aware, is not just so much being aware of what's happening to you, but realizing that you deserve more than what you're getting.
Oh, Brian, that's good. Yes, realizing that, you know what, you are worth more than what that person that's telling you you're not. You are worth more. You're worth the change. You're worth the effort. You're worth, maybe going through a little bit of the pain, but picking yourself up and saying enough is enough. I'm not going to do this anymore because it's to my detriment. One, it can lead to bad things if I don't fix it, but it's to my detriment to my health if I do fix it. And that's, that's...
It's like weighing the pros and cons of the situation. You can sit there and wish to your heart's content that things would have been different. But even if you could have fixed the current problem, would that have really fixed it? Or would it have just been more of the same?
So how far does change go?
Change always starts with you.
And that can mean a lot of things, and that can go far, deep, and wide. I mean, sometimes it's not just about mentally and emotionally changing yourself. Sometimes it's about physically changing yourself to the point where you have to remove yourself from those situations. Yep. Because it is for your mental and your emotional well-being that you physically move yourself away from those situations, because you are worth it. You absolutely are worth it.
That's the whole point of being self-aware, is realizing your self-worth.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Oh, God.
Nobody's perfect.
And we all have regrets.
And I really want to stress that, because so many people, when I've told people about our podcast and what we do and stuff like that,
awesome.
And I mention the things that I say, and even some people who've listened to it, they'll ask me questions and they'll be like, how do you know your self-worth? And that's when you have somebody beside you that will see the worth in you themselves, and they remind you of it. And then that gets planted in your head, and you realize, I am better than that.
Isn't there not enough of that?
There's never enough.
There isn't.
There's so much negativity.
There's so much negativity. There's so much division. There's so much hate. There's so much bad competition. There's nothing wrong with competition, but it's
when it becomes personal.
Yeah.
Spiteful.
Like, why do you got to be that way? Why can't you lift people up? Why can't you find a way to encourage people? You know what?
I know an answer to that.
You want to be the better person. You want that person to be the better person, but yet you're beating them with this stick. Stop doing that.
You know what the fundamental reason for that is?
What?
It's pride.
Pride. Oh, you nailed it. Pride.
sometimes people are afraid to see you be better than what they think you are or what they know you, because they don't want it to diminish their own self-worth.
Right.
Or I guess you could say, not self-worth, there's a word for it.
Narcissism?
It's part of it. But no, there's an actual word for it, and of course it escapes me now. But, people can be threatened by confidence.
Oh, absolutely. And you will pinpoint those people out in a hurry if you're the type of person that you have a silent confidence. You don't have to prove your confidence when you don't have pride.
Yeah.
If you have pride, you have to throw that confidence out there everywhere because you want people to see who you are, because you're worried if you lose it, you'll be nothing. That's not true. You're not nothing. But the point is that you don't have to tear other people down to lift yourself up. Just have a silent confidence about yourself, and people will know that.
I've practiced that physically with people who I've gotten into fights with. Mm-hmm. They'll come at me and they're yelling and screaming, and I'll just stand there silently. And by the time they finally realize, that they've exhausted all of their options, it freaks them out. Mm-hmm. It's almost like they start questioning themselves, like they don't know what to say. They're like, I just opened myself up to this person on everything, and they're just standing there staring me down. And it's like, who's the worst person? Cowards sometimes talk the loudest.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so true. It's so true. And pride is such a... you got to be careful with that, because you can have pride and not even realize you have it. And I think that's the worst, because that type of pride, you are that person who has no problem tearing someone else down.
Yeah.
Because you have so many faults that you've put them in the back of your mind because you think you're perfect. Mm. So now you've become the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And you are none of those.
I see a lot of times that people that do stuff like that oftentimes will, and I can say this with this current situation that I'm dealing with, is that, or I should say was dealing with.
Thank you.
Is that the thing that I noticed is that the very things that this person hated from people around them was the same thing they did to me.
Wow. They call that projection.
And how many people do you guys know that have done that to you?
Yeah.
The very thing that they say that they hate is the very thing they do to you. Mm-hmm. You can read a lot about a person by the way they act, especially when it comes to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it becomes.
And then that's when you have to start self-reflecting and being like, do I deserve this? Should I stand for this? Would the person giving it to you, would they crumble if you did the same thing to them?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they will. They'll break right down.
Yeah.
Because they can dish it out, but they can't take it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where life experience comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I said earlier, the more you go through, the more you can handle. Mm-hmm. Because you start to see patterns throughout those experiences, and you can react the same way in situations that bring you down, because you're like, I've been through this before. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing that again.
Right. Yeah.
And then you come back stronger from it, and the person you just left behind doesn't know what to do.
It's true. Yeah, and people who have that demeanor, that pride of not knowing how when somebody confronts them, they project those things on other people, exactly what they're doing. And they want to bring you down to their level.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to handle life. They don't know how to handle their situation. So they blame everything on you and make you to be the bad person when it's them.
Or at least a large part of it. Like I said, nobody's perfect. There's probably things we could all do different and things that I could have done different.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when I've done all I could,
Right.
and I even still at the very end still tried to fix the problem.
Yeah, you did. What are you going to do?
What more do I have to lose when I have nothing else to gain?
Yep. No, you gotta be the bigger person, and not only realize
Even if that means making the hard decisions.
Yeah.
Or being the one to make the hard decisions.
I know. And I know because I know the situation. But it's okay. You know, sometimes you have to walk away for a minute and say, okay, I need a moment, and the situation will be taken care of.
The thing I have to tell myself and anybody who's going through similar situations that they can relate to what I'm saying, the thing that I have to keep telling myself is that everything is okay. And everything will be okay.
Do you believe that when you say that?
Yes. Because I am going to make sure it'll be okay.
Really?
It has nothing to do with those around me. It has nothing to do with the circumstances of my environment. It's me.
So you don't need situations, people,
having those things
around
help.
you to tell you that it's going to be okay. You can do that within yourself.
Having those things help, of course. But at the end of the day, they can sit there and tell me that all they want. Fat lot of good all of it does if I don't accept it.
Right.
If I don't do something about it. And I will.
Okay, tell me how you make sure that it's going to be okay. And you can use this week as an example.
When I find myself in that low of the situation, I step back and I think of what I lost. Was what I lost worth it? Some things no. Some things yes. But with all of that being said, I can sit there and say with absolute certainty that I didn't deserve what I was getting. There's only so much you can do when you're finally put with your back up against the wall. And I'm sure everyone has heard this saying, but a cornered rat always bites. And that's where I'm at. If I can't run anymore, I will bite. And that's what I encourage people to do who listen to this and are struggling to find their purpose in life, struggling to find their destiny in life, is just know that the way you carry yourself helps drive you towards that purpose. Because it's easy to lay in bed and accept defeat. But when you don't challenge yourself, when you don't move yourself, how do you move forward?
You can't. No, you can't, because when you let yourself be defeated, you're never going to grow, because that won't bring on change, and that's what brings on growth is change.
Yep.
And I know you're not lying when you say these things, because there were many times I went to see you and I'm like, Brian, are you okay? Are you really okay? And you're like, yep, I am. And I know when you're lying to me, and I know you weren't. So when you say, no, I'm okay, when you sit here and you tell me I'm going to make sure that I'm okay, that was my question to you, was how do you make yourself know that everything is going to be okay? I mean, you can sit there and convince yourself and tell yourself, yeah, everything's going to be okay, because eventually things do work out. You know, one way or another, they're going to work out.
That's where action comes in, you know? It's not so much just sitting there telling myself. It's actually making physical, mental, emotional moves to make sure you're okay.
Right. Yeah, because you have to be willing to do that, and that sometimes that can be really hard, but you can do it. I mean,
we all can.
So I'm going to say that that's probably where we'll leave it for tonight. Do you have any other questions, comments, concerns you want to throw out there?
No, I would have to say that, everything seems to be moving along quite well.
Yeah.
And I would hope that anybody else who's going through, again, based on what I've said, obviously I didn't go into detail,
Right.
but anybody that's dealing with things that they feel that they can't give any more of themselves, or that they're giving more than what they need, or, where they feel that their situation is completely hopeless, just know that at the end of the day, it's about you.
That's true.
And I don't mean that selfishly.
No.
I don't mean that selfishly. So I want to clarify. When I say it's about you, without you, that thing, that situation, that person, without you, they wouldn't have what they had.
Oh, wow. I like that. And you have to learn to be kind to yourself. You have to understand that when I say be kind to yourself, you have to realize that you are worth something. No matter what anybody thinks of you, no matter what situation they're putting you in, you are worth something. You have to learn to be kind to yourself and know that you, even though you might have to make some hard decisions, some hard changes, some hard moves in order to better your situation to your detriment, you are worth it. And when you learn to be kind to yourself, I think that's when you can learn to be kind to others, because number one, it tears down that wall of pride. And I think you become more empathetic towards other people because you look at life in a different lens to where you can look at somebody else's situation and say, you know what, I've been there. So you're not going to be as judgy. You're going to be more sympathetic to them. And I think that's a good place to be.
That's not even just so much judging, but maybe, more understanding too.
Yeah.
You can relate to that person on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Because obviously I would never encourage anybody to judge anybody based on what they're going through, because you don't know.
You don't know.
But if you confide in that person and they tell you and you're like, oh, I've lived through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you can say, not only can I just, empathize and, say, yeah, I've been there with you. I know how you feel. You'd be like, no, I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Been there.
It can form that connection, and before you know it, you can build a bond with people that way.
Yeah, it's really important to find people that are good support to you and encourage you in those situations, because support is very, very important. So I just want to leave you with this, that imagine what life would look like if we all found our purpose. Imagine how much happier life would be if we all lived in our destinies. It may take small steps, but taking the first step is what matters. It's okay to dream and smile again. It really is.
It's powerful.
Yeah. So we'll say goodnight. And again, our email is givemheck@gmail.com. Again, that's GIVEMHECC@gmail.com. Again, share, like, subscribe, and turn on any notifications. And again, thank you all for being with us. And we look forward to our next podcast with you.
Absolutely. See you next week, everyone.
Good night.